Welcome to Tech Talks. I'm Holly Scott. Today I have the pleasure of chatting with Dr. Esra Roan, the co-founder, CEO, president, and chairperson of the board of Somovac, a young company that is focused on improving surgical recovery and outcomes. They have a very novel technology, and I'm thrilled that she's agreed to chat with us today. Welcome, Esra. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Holly, for this opportunity. Thank you for bringing, shedding light on the problem that we're addressing in our company. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. You know, Dr. Roan is incredibly accomplished. She has her bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering from Tennessee Technological University and her PhD in mechanical engineering from University of Cincinnati. I'm curious, perhaps you could share with us a bit on the foundation that has become Somovac. Where did this idea start? How did we become where we are today?
So thank you for asking that question, because as you noted, my background is in mechanical engineering. I was a tenured professor in biomedical engineering. So I crept from mechanical into biomedical engineering slowly in my career. I think as female engineers, we try to find purpose in what we do. So I think that's what I was searching from consumer electronics at 3M, automotive prior to that into biomedical. So during my research years at the University of Memphis, where I had a phenomenal department, phenomenal group of folks with whom I worked, my work resulted in papers and research dollars. And although I very much enjoyed spending time with students, as an engineer, you want to solve problems. You want to do something more hands-on as a mechanical engineer. So I ended up coming across hernia surgeons, open ventral hernia repair. As you know, this is a major area with complications. Mm-hmm. And I ended up going into their OR, and I was somewhat of a kid in a candy shop with lots of problems that I could see that as a mechanical engineer, soft tissue, but biomechanicist, I could provide some answers. And that's kind of where the problem statement came from. Seromas are a big deal in open ventral hernia repairs. They lead to seromas, complicated seromas, non-resolving seromas in 1 and 3. So that's where we got to problem statement. But I had decided to leave the university. And I was telling my neighbor about the drains and seromas, and she told me about her breast cancer journey that had seromas and drains, right? So that's kind of how, from being an engineer that wants to solve problems, research is great, but doesn't yield to actual day-to-day answers necessarily in the timelines that I wanted, 10 to 3, basically. But then meeting women with breast cancer, post-op recovery dilemmas is where I felt like the company was, really solidified. It goes without saying, I have to mention that we've got our start with the 0 to 510 medical device accelerator here in Memphis. That gave us our first investment dollars. So that also came. So those were the 3 things probably in having Josh Hervig as my co-founder, who was an phenomenal engineer student who could do anything. So wow. That's it's serendipitous. It's quite a few things that have to come together to launch something like this.
Clearly, yeah, no, clearly. So you saw, as you said, the kid in the candy store. You're in surgery. You're seeing the procedure itself, and then what we all in the industry know from a high level is that post-surgery recovery and infection rates and outcomes are critical after the patient leaves the OR. So how did the focus become on specifically the Somovac technology, and what makes it special?
Yes, so you mentioned something. So when I was working on open ventral hernia repair as a project, sutureless mesh repair was my area. We would have animal models, and we would have complications that resulted in bad outcomes in these animal models. So seroma was one of those, buildup of fluids after surgery. So when I was in the OR, while I saw things that I could do in the OR, I've been in cases that are 4 to 6 hours long in general surgery where you're dissecting the bowels out of the abdominal wall, and then the patient goes home for 3-4 weeks to recover, and no one is looking at that, right? Surgeon, nursing, amazing staff, hospitals, everyone works so hard to perfect what's happening within the walls of the hospital. And yet the recovery, wound healing, all of these things are taking place outside. So when we heard about the seroma problem, I couldn't believe that we're sending patients home with surgical drains. So you're trying to remove the fluid from building up, because that's what happens in these major surgeries where you leave dead space. That's the wording used, unfortunate, I think, or undermine layers. You place drains in there, you try to remove the fluid. If it builds up, you end up with complications. Well, patients at home have to maintain these things and for weeks at a time, and the technology has not been really thought of right in the scientific sense. It's just slap something on there and let's send them out and blame the patient for everything that's going wrong. So that's how it all evolved. But ultimately, if you look at breast reconstructions, for example, post-op, post-mastectomy, immediate breast reconstruction, over 100,000 women each year go on to have these surgeries in the US. 19% return to OR rates.
Wow.
1 in 3 complicated seromas. Numbers vary. There's conversations. If you have high BMI, other comorbidities, those numbers go up. We need to do better. And part of it is post-operative care, period. And that's what the area in which it's kind of like an overlooked area in healthcare. Tennis analogy, no man's land, you know, like you just don't want to be there. So whose problem is it? Who should solve it? So we took it on ourselves at Somovac to handle post-operative first, fluid management, but post-operative care after surgeries.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that prevalent. That's a scary statistic.
That's just breast reconstructions. Hernias, it's 350,000 cases each year.
Amazing.
Go home with drains.
Wow.
Yeah.
And if I'm recalling and thinking of the current standard of care, it's a bulb, like, or the historic standard of care. It's more like a bulb, more of a manual drain type system. Is that correct? Is that where's the innovation for Somovac? Where have we taken this fluid management?
So there really is a couple of things here. Deep tissue negative pressure therapy is what's needed. Deep tissue negative pressure therapy that's constant, that's reliable is what's needed. What that does is first, it pulls the fluids out. And we're talking about 1 liter or over a liter of fluid over weeks. So when we're talking about the amount of fluid that needs to be removed in a compassionate, reliable way is over a liter most of the time. So that fluid needs to be removed. But then once you remove the fluids, second part to that is that deep tissue negative pressure therapy brings tissue layers together and maintains that. So that is something that's novel. No one else is doing that. So removal of fluid with the manual suction devices that exists, 50 years old technology. If you're pumping all the time, if the patient is doing the work all the time, removal of the fluids possibly can be achieved, but holding tissue layers down, delivering deep tissue negative pressure therapy, this is only Somovac is able to do that.
That's phenomenal. And that negative pressure therapy is a remarkable addition to that space, because I haven't seen that in wound management in this context. So
yes.
And other procedures that you envision this being able to be utilized on, mastectomies certainly. Will general surgery benefit from technologies like this? Will other applications?
Yes, FDA cleared us for general and plastic, large flat-forming surgeries. That's where we are currently. So you have open ventral hernia repairs, some other repairs of abdominal wall that are flaps. Then you have axillary, other oncologic resections for sarcomas and variety of reasons. Then you can also imagine we are getting pulled for trauma flaps, orthopedic secondary flaps. If you think about hip and knee revisions, infection situations, we are seeing some usage in there as well. In general, surgical drains are utilized also in spine. We do not have FDA clearance for that indication, but the future of the company, one can imagine neuro and spine and intra-abdominal applications. So post-op fluid management is a big problem in quite a few surgeries. But our immediate goal is to go after all of the breast cancer surgeries to service that market, help patients recover and solve real problems, reduce complications. And then I would say general surgeries, hernias. And then from there, I would say trauma and some of the complicated orthopedic situations.
That's excellent. There's the recovery, the optimization, minimizing risks. The other point that is, it's so obvious when you see the technology is the discrete nature of it. The way it's created. It's small, it's elegant, it's a much easier and less cumbersome technology compared to the way the bulbs had tended to hang. I would imagine that adds improvement of quality of life in that recovery period.
Without a doubt. When you interview women or men as well who are recovering from breast cancer, because it is, while it's a female condition, it does happen in men as well. One of the things they tell us is, so the survivors, if you do talk to them 5 years out or 10 years out, one of the first things they'll say is those drains were the worst part of it.
Oh, yeah.
And we try to understand that. If you think about, they are undergoing breast cancer or cancer care, and they're telling us 5 years out, that was the worst part of it. We are a closed system. Somovac, deep tissue negative pressure therapy, is a closed system. So the patient will, or their loved ones, will not interact with the bodily fluids. When we're talking about, again, large amounts of fluid that's coming, you will not interact with those. You will not have to pour anymore, right, into a cup, which is normally, that's what they need to do. It's discreet. We hear from our patients that they're able to go to Thanksgiving, they're able to go to graduations, they're able to go to grocery store with a Somovac, because sometimes drains are in 2 to 3 weeks. But at the same time, our most significant benefit to patients in that sense is we have initial clinical data that shows shortening time with drains. Drains can be removed sooner with Somovac, and we've shown 30% reduction with drains in mastectomy patients in our backyard here in Memphis. So that is the single most, right, important, so that they can go on to have chemotherapy or return to their lives, whichever. And I know we're focusing on cancer care, but that's true with cosmetic patients, which we have not described yet, but tummy tucks or a variety of patients who choose to have a surgery and they want to go back to work, they want to go back to life, right? For everyone who's having a surgery, Somovac can provide an avenue by which they can go back to what they're doing sooner.
That's remarkable, and translating to less of in the non-elective procedures, less of a cost burden too for the clinician, the payers. When you have the recovery, that the throughput is faster when you have the patient getting back to recovering without the risks as predominant. That translates to cost savings, which is always an important piece of this. Even though we put patients first, it's certainly important.
Yes, I mean, we always say, right, Somovac is the clinically right choice, compassionate, the right thing to do, but ultimately it also saves dollars to the hospitals. Basically, if we look at a population of 100 breast reconstruction patients, if we take 19% return to OR down to 10%, 2.2 Somovacs right? 2.2 less cases pay for all the Somovacs because you're spending over $2,200 per patient currently on their complications, on that one return to OR number, excluding all the other things like nursing time, spillage, all of these things add up. We just don't think too much about what happens after the surgery.
That's it.
And if we did, I think we would save money, less interventions, less pain, everyone would do better.
All around, it's a win-win. All around, it's completely logical.
Yes.
Well, I have a comment before I ask my next question. It's admirable that you have, as a first-time CEO, taken the organization as far as you have and navigated its first FDA clearance. I must commend you for that. In the big picture, where you sit today, what do you see as the greatest opportunities and also headwinds for the organization as you are in your launch infancy?
Thank you. Thank you for making some of the comments you made, but it's always about the team. My co-founder, Josh Herwig, without him, this would have not happened. Phil Ryan, who joined us from Olympus as well early, we treat him like a co-founder. It's all about teamwork. These things don't happen. And our regulatory consultant, Dawn Norman, she was extremely patient with us because I want to tie to our previous comment before single-use, home-use technologies are not well understood yet in healthcare system. Who is going to pay for them? I'm sure you are aware of reimbursement scheme and all of those things about post-op recovery single-use devices. That's what Somovac is. So I think that's why we're trailblazing in that a little bit, along with a couple of other companies. I would say that's the headwind, right? Understanding who pays for this thing, right? Who sells this thing, who pays for this thing is really the key element that we're working through right now, because the value of ensuring patient's recovery or the work done by the patient and their loved one, making that easier so everyone has a win. Ultimately, we don't bring this patient back home, back to the clinic or back to the OR, is really something that I think there's increasing attention to it, but the OR director's budget or the hospital's budget, how does it impact it? So that's the world we live in. It's a bit of a headwind, I would say, but I think that we are a technical team, certainly. I myself started from the technical side, now really appreciating the commercialization side of things because we are building a sales team and giving them the right tools to position the product for success. That's I would describe as the headwind. We take a lot of pride in helping patients and their loved ones, because no one thinks of their pain and suffering at home. So, and we want to keep them away. So that drives us. That's the mission. Helping others, learning, remaining curious and driven is really part of the DNA of this company.
Well, I can attest to the team that you're building, and that is a common thread between each of them, putting that at the forefront and putting that patient and that care and that heart in the middle of all your decisions. So that is truly remarkable. This is a question because you are so accomplished and so interesting that I must ask, as someone who is an innovator, you're off to the races with this phenomenal technology that is without question going to be wildly successful.
Thank you.
If resources and time and money were unlimited, what would be next for you? What else is percolating in that brilliant mind of yours?
Oh, we do have pipeline products. I mean, we would probably expedite the launch of those. We do have a biotech angle to the company, not just medtech. We would pursue that side a little more aggressively. Basically, we are, so the fluid that we collect in the bags, in these closed bags, currently are being tossed, right? But this is fluid that's being collected from the surgical site. And we have ways to analyze that help the analysis of that fluid. So I would really say that that biotech angle can be pursued if the money was unlimited. So I would spend quite a few more dollars in our commercialization and get this product in millions of patients' hands each year as fast as we can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the mind is.
That's fascinating about the technology that could come, or the science or the discovery that could come from the fluid that's left basically on the floor, you know, that's left for the trash. Yeah, that's fascinating.
And that's why Somovac as a company is really an interesting opportunity for anyone, right? We are not one-dimensional. You know, we provide a 24/7 patient support line because we know that drain calls, drain management is not just a medical device company solution. It's also a human service, providing is part, servicing those patients is part of it.
Sure.
And bridging what the patient needs and unable to say to the physician because they respect the physician, we're bridging that gap. So, and I would say it's part of company's future where we capture all of this and put this into work to the benefit of patients and physicians and hospitals. We kind of form a network between everyone in a constructive way. So that's kind of what the unlimited dollars would do, get all of that done sooner.
Well, as that headwind that you mentioned, you know, the market development, it's not a product issue. Your product works and does what it says it's going to do. Yes. The market is new to this space and the evolution, right? And as you're creating it, Somovac it has the potential to be an entire ecosystem for care for these patients. So
yes,
that's quite an opportunity. That's quite
an opportunity. And you know, we are also, you know, we need women to possibly speak up what's not working for them, because us women, you know, we say it's okay, I don't want to be a burden on my caregivers, or I don't want to complain, but when I interview so many women who have gone through, you know, they really wish that it was better. And to me, not only how the post-op care is and whether it's dignified, whether it's easy, all of those, we should do more to reduce complication rates from 1 in 3 to 1 in 0, you know, 1 in 10. I mean, we should be doing everything in our power to make these surgeries more successful, in my mind. And that's my science, that's my engineering, that's my, right? When I used to teach, you know, engineering, I used to also believe that first and foremost we're humans, right? We have to look at the problems as first people, and then scientists and engineers, and then come up with the solutions. So I think we should aspire to solve the problems that we see. I'm maybe too naive. This is where first-time CEO and commercialization, I believe that good solutions will get there. And we believe we have that commercial, you know, we'll get there commercially as well. You have to stay in there and fight for it.
Definitely not naivety. That's resilience, and that's the drive. What gets us up in the morning, our North Star, right?
Yeah,
it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, I am thrilled to be in partnership with you and the Somovac team. It's been incredible learning more about you and your foundation. One last question, because you piqued my interest. As you go back and think about the inception of the device, right? So you have this idea of what you're trying to solve, and going from this napkin to, you know, to really designing it out. Was there a particular segment of that product development process that was more challenging, that was what was a real puzzle for you? I'm curious about that. Was there an aspect of it? Because as I see what it was and now what it is, it looks like it's like, wow, why was it not always this way?
Yes. Oh, it's very much like airplane versus walking. You know, if I told you you can come from Tampa to Memphis walking or flying or with a jet, it's that kind of difference, right? The challenge always was standing up for the things that I heard from patients at home. So we were interviewing hundreds of them and hearing consistent messages. And then we would bring them to physicians, and then of course they see them in the OR and they see them when they're rounding, rightfully, that the understanding of the issues they're having were different, right? So making sure that we communicated upstream what the patient was telling us, and balancing the needs of the physicians and balancing perception or needs of the physicians with what the patients needed. I can give you a plain example of this is the size of our bags. Our collection bags are 100 cc, and patients told us over and over and over that they really disliked having large amounts of fluids on them. This is your bodily fluids, you're walking around, it's sloshing around, if you imagine, and it gives them a lack of confidence, right? And it really creates stress. And pouring that fluid, large amount out, and all of those. So we run into the question of why can't we make the bags larger all the time, right? From the HCPs, healthcare providers who see the patients only in the clinic, in the hospital, or right after surgery. But that patient, most of these are outpatient cases. Maybe hernias are 3-4 days in. Most of the recovery is at home when they're wearing this belt and device. And they have, now then we don't pour the fluid, we just click it off and throw it away. The issue of maintaining has gone away. So making sure to communicate that we really don't need a larger bag. Here's why, because this is how it's being used at home. And by the way, this makes it easier for them to use, where, as we know, there's data after data about usability converts into compliance, not with our specific technology, but generally, if you make something usable, it gives you better outcomes. So balancing what we heard from patients and their loved ones about their pain points at home, standing up on their behalf to the payers and the hospitals and or everyone, HCPs, and balancing that, right, going back and forth. We were kind of like the middle ground to find an answer. So that we spent significant time optimizing to both sides' needs and tried to get something that delivered right to the healthcare provider, deep tissue negative pressure therapy, consistent, robust, always. To the patient, let's make it easy so they can use it, so that deep tissue negative pressure therapy is delivered all the time, right? So we had to convince the physician, if we did it this way, that deep tissue negative pressure therapy will be delivered. So that's our work. So balancing those, I think, is usually, and when I used to teach again, right, I taught biomechanics, 4th-year design type stuff. I would really encourage the students to be brave, to ask good questions, and to dig deep into the layers of the onion of the problem and really go to the bottom of it, and not just take answers at top level. So we did that a lot. Sorry, it's a long answer.
I love that answer. And that in that class, I'm sure there were some future entrepreneurs born, being encouraged along that path.
I hope so.
That's great.
I hope so.
Well, this has been phenomenal. I so appreciate you sharing time and the magic of Somovac with us and our audience today. The new innovation and new technology is what we're all about here, and this is certainly one that has tremendous, tremendous promise. So thank you for joining, Dr. Roan. Great seeing you again.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate your time, and you can reach out, anyone listening to this, you can reach out to us to inquire about Somovac's availability in your region, and we'd be glad to serve you and your patients. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks for joining us on Tech Talks. Until next time, I'm Holly Scott.